Hello friends, I welcome all of you to my lecture sessions on biochemistry for pharmacy students. So here I am initiating a new series of lectures on enzymes, a very important topic indeed. Enzymes is not only important for pharmacy but it is also a subject of common interest to science students also. So I made almost half a dozen lectures on enzymes. So in this series, in this section, we will discuss in detail about introduction and the structure of enzyme. So let's go ahead and then see what is there in this lecture. The development of biochemistry is based on certain questions, certain observations. So one of the key observations scientists made regarding life that is present in a living being. Okay, so because what we do, because if an organism is to be recognized as a living being, then it will show some characteristics. Okay, so those characteristics, why they are happening, is the question scientists have been pursuing. So one of the way how they can solve this puzzle is through analyzing or studying the biochemical reactions. Okay, so for biochemical reactions they found certain characteristics like they happen at room temperature, okay, at nominal temperature. So whatever you do, like I'll give you a very simple example so that you can understand very easily. Let's say you wanted to get, you all know this one, okay, starch is a polymer of glucose. So if you hydrolyze this, you are supposed to get glucose. What is the temperature we need to use? Usually at 100 degrees centigrade you have to add water and then boil for at least 1 hour, okay, so that you can hydrolyze starch into solution, or mostly, okay, it's simple carbohydrates. But when you consume same starch, okay, when you eat it, then at body temperature, means 37.5 degrees centigrade, and within 15 minutes you can convert starch into glucose. This is really amazing. Okay, 15 to 20 minutes, okay, it all depends. Within 15 to 20 minutes you can hydrolyze starch into simple carbohydrate, that is glucose. So how come it is happening is a very big question. Okay, so scientists have been looking for answers just to see how our body got this amazing capability to perform tough biochemical reactions, tough chemical reactions with ease. The second one is the biochemical reactions, whatever happening in our body, okay, all are controllable. They control themselves. It is like when you have a few biochemical reactions, like I'm giving you one example only. A is supposed to give B, okay, because in our body biochemical reactions happen in stage wise manner. So let's say B is giving us C, C is giving us D. The concentration of either C will control A, or concentration of B will control A, or the produce is going to control the way the rate of biochemical reactions that are happening in the previous steps. Okay, so this is the way how it is almost like a feedback mechanism. Feedback mechanism means our biochemical reactions, they can monitor their own speed, they can control their own speed. That's really amazing. Now how come it is happening is a very big question again. The third one is they are very specific. They are very specific. So I'll give you one more example here. The same starch we take into consideration. Our human biological system can hydrolyze starch to glucose so that from glucose we can get energy. Okay, but animals have the capability to make use of even cellulose to get glucose, to get energy. Okay, but for human beings, whatever system that we have inside our body won't be able to make use of cellulose as a source of energy. Okay, so our system, human system, is so specific for starch. Okay, so this specificity is in one way gives uniqueness and a directionality and objectiveness to our biochemical environment inside our body. The fourth and very, very important one is adaptation to the needs. Adaptation to the needs means, I'll give you one more simple example. Let's say you are used to eat carbs to get energy. Okay, so you are living in a particular place where lot of carbs are available, so starchy material or bread or pizza or whatever it is that you are eating to get energy. But you shifted your place where these carbohydrate rich food is not available. Let's say you went to the northern areas, very cold areas, where they don't eat starchy food, they feed on lipids as well as proteins. Then what to do? So you shifted your place, your body is used to consume carbohydrates to get energy. Then when you shift your place, your body will slowly tune its environment inside the system, okay, to consume lipids and proteins to obtain energy. Okay, so your body will be adapted to the environment, to the requirements, so that it evolves a mechanism to extract energy exclusively from proteins and lipids. So these are the four very important observations what scientists made essential for this life to exist. So there is something in our living beings which is actually doing all these four, which has these four characteristics. Okay, so those inquiries actually led to discovery of several things, which ultimately gave us the subject biochemistry, whatever we can see right now. So one topic that revolutionized every concept in biochemistry and helped in evolution of biochemistry to the level whatever we are seeing right now is the concept of enzymes. Okay, so the concept of enzymes evolved by inquiring into life events, by keeping in their mind all these four: the reactions happening at room temperature, controllable, they are specific, and they adapt to the needs. So these are the four guiding principles which were there at the back of their mind to inquire into life events, which ultimately led us to the concept of enzymes. Okay, so this is the way how the enzymes component evolved. Now let's see. So these are all the great scientists who has contributed significantly to the development of the concept of enzymes. Okay, so it all started with a humble beginnings in 1751. An ornithologist, René Reaumur, was working on study of birds and their carcasses. He observed that the gastric system of vegetable eating birds and meat eating birds are completely different. And here he observed that, he demonstrated in fact, the gastric contents when they cut open the GIT, especially the stomach, and when the contents were mixed with meat, he found that gastric contents have this capability to digest the meat, means cut down meat particles into smaller particles, solubilized particles. So this is the first ever demonstration of our biological components having the capability, demonstrable capability to achieve certain chemical reactions. Later on, Gottlieb Kirchhoff discovered plant amylase. This is the first ever report of proof of concept, like establishing the biochemical environment existing in plants which is able to achieve chemical reactions, like here hydrolysis of starch to glucose. And then Anselm Payne for the first time isolated. So far whatever we have seen are only demonstrations with the crude materials. Anselm Payne for the first time isolated diastase from malt extract in 1833. At that time, because he was able to isolate and then show for sure a chemical achieving chemical reactions, okay, without getting consumed, means it is almost like a catalytic activity. So it became so popular that enzymes became, diastase became a synonym for enzyme. People have started using diastase as a synonym for enzyme. And then Theodor Schwann in 1836 isolated pepsin from gastric contents of animal material. So here this is the first ever report of isolation of an enzyme from animal resource. Okay, so and later on hundreds and hundreds of enzymes were isolated and identified. Their roles have been identified. Okay, now it's an established protocol how to do the and isolation, etc. So these are the findings which laid foundations, basic foundations for development of enzymes. Later on, Louis Pasteur, close to 1880, he coined the term vitalism. It's a concept actually. What he has shown is yeast cells were able to achieve fermentation. Okay, because he was actually working on, because Louis Pasteur is known for his contributions in microbiology, biotechnology, organic chemistry, stereochemistry. So Louis Pasteur, while observing the fermentation of starch to other materials, what he coined is, he was able to establish something like there is something in living cells which is actually responsible for these biochemical reactions, that something cannot be separated from living cell. Okay, so this is what, indirectly whatever he is saying is, life in a living cell is existing in the form of specific chemicals which we can call them as fermenters. Okay, so this concept is what we call it as vitalism. Everybody has accepted it, okay, because in case of life, okay, life means you are able to respond, you are able to do some work by consuming energy, a consumable outcome is there. So that is what is achieved via certain molecules which Louis Pasteur called them as fermenters. And then this concept is what we call it as vitalism. But later on, shortly thereafter, it happened in 1880, in 1897, Edward Buchner, a Nobel laureate in fact, he demonstrated that yeast extract, means he has shredded the yeast cells and obtained cell-free extract, and this extract, he showed that this extract is enough to achieve fermentation of sugar to alcohol. So he has demonstrated that living cell is not needed for achieving a biochemical reaction. So for his contributions he was awarded Nobel Prize later on in 1907. And then Frederick Kuhne, he actually coined the term enzyme. So far many people are calling enzyme by different names, okay. Louis Pasteur called them as fermenters, and then others called them as diastase, etc. But here Frederick Kuhne for the first time coined the term enzymes. And later on in 1931, Edward Lukes isolated salivary amylase, and from then onwards many biochemical reactions were studied along with an enzyme achieving that particular chemical conversion. So all these comprehensive studies on enzymes resulted in elucidation of several biochemical pathways in our body, including carbohydrate metabolism, lipid metabolism, etc. So these are some of the very important contributions from great scientists. And later on, in 1926, James Sumner, his contributions are really laudable. He has crystallized an enzyme for the first time. He has isolated urease enzyme and crystallized it and studied it by using crystallography techniques. And for the first time, he observed that all enzymes are proteins. Without any exceptions, all enzymes are proteins. But all proteins need not be enzymes. So this is the observation whatever he made for the first time. And then another scientific contribution from another great person, Emil Fischer, because he is known for his contributions in organic chemistry, especially stereochemistry. So while studying stereochemistry and observing biochemical reactions, he for the first time coined this one, lock and key theory. So he observed that our biological systems are so specific towards the geometry of an organic compound. Okay, so in that way, our system is able to only assimilate, only take in certain chemicals with prefixed, okay, some specific requirements are there as far as three-dimensional structure is concerned. So that's the reason why what he said is like something, life that is there in our body needs specific dimensions of a molecule which can enter into our body and get itself assimilated in our system. So this is later on, this particular concept evolved and it became the basic principle for development of enzyme inhibitors and drugs. So for your information, more than 60% of drugs that we have right now in the market are all either enzyme activators or enzyme inhibitors. Mostly they are enzyme inhibitors only. Okay, so friends, this is the way how the concept of enzyme came into being and it evolved. Without enzymes, you cannot describe any biochemical reaction. Okay, so in the beginning, after establishment of enzyme and its role in biochemical reactions, many people used this concept in either studying the life form or certain biochemical reactions, or to unravel mysteries about health and disease status of a person, and also using these amazing chemicals in solving certain puzzles which are related to either synthetic chemistry or medicinal chemistry. So let's see, and let's discuss about them in brief. Emil Fischer, as I told you, for his contributions in stereochemistry and lock and key concept, he was awarded Nobel Prize in 1902. And activation energy and catalysis. Okay, so these terms were actually coined by Arrhenius, and his contributions are really, really great. And as I told you, Edward Buchner in 1907 was awarded Nobel Prize for his demonstration beyond doubt that cell-free extracts are enough to achieve fermentation. So here, these two are really, really important. The contributions by the great scientists over here, Harden, Euler, Ekman and Hopkins, regarding coenzymes, enzyme activators, the relation between food, nutrition and our health, and nutrition, how it helps in enzymes to function. So all these are actually responsible for our detailed understanding of biochemistry right now. And then later on, the respiratory enzymes and enzymes related to carbohydrate metabolism, lipid metabolism were established by 1940, and several of them, including Saint Georgi and Corey and Krebs, Lippmann, all of them were awarded Nobel Prizes for their contributions. And later on, Sanger for the first time demonstrated using an enzyme to structure elucidate another protein. Enzyme is a protein, okay, using that protein to achieve structural elucidation of another protein. That's really interesting. This is a novel concept for which he was awarded Nobel Prize. And in that way, all these are great scientists who contributed. Okay, so one of the very important point which is essential for development of drugs as well as medicinal chemistry, because for pharmacy students or science students this is very important. Cornforth in 1975 he was awarded Nobel Prize for studying stereochemistry of enzyme reactions. Okay, this is one, and the second one is Black and his colleagues in 1988 were awarded Nobel Prize in medicine, inhibitors as drugs. So these are the two concepts which are very, very important for development of drugs, development of enzyme inhibitors and medicinal chemistry. And these are the remaining enzymes. Right now, Arian Warshall and others were awarded Nobel Prize in 2013 for their contributions in computational chemistry. By using computational modeling, they were able to predict enzyme dynamics as well as enzyme physicochemical properties of enzyme substrate interactions. So that actually is responsible for development of computer-aided drug designing right now. That is a very important component in drug discovery cycle and in medicinal chemistry right now. So friends, this is the way how the concept of enzyme in living being and life reactions, biochemical reactions which are responsible for life in a living being are established. So let's go ahead and then see what are the specific characteristics of enzymes. Nearly all enzymes are proteins. Okay, most of the enzymes are proteins, but the only thing that is different is in 1980s or somewhere around that one, scientists found that some of the ribonucleic acids have that capability of catalyzing splitting of certain polymerization of nucleic acids. Okay, so these are also acting as catalysts, so that's why we call them as ribozymes. Around 3000 different molecules or different types of enzymes will be there in a single cell. If you take a single cell, how many different types of reactions are going to happen inside? Okay, you have a nucleus, you have ribozymes, you have no lipid biosynthesis, carbohydrate biosynthesis, nucleic acid biosynthesis. Different types of biochemical reactions are happening continuously within a cell. So that's the reason why it is not really surprising to know that 3000 different enzymes are there. Okay, it is so expansive, and in some cases the enzymes are present in a no, restricted areas, like oxidative degradation happens within mitochondria. So those enzymes which are responsible for this oxidative degradation are present only within mitochondria. Proteolytic enzymes are present within lysozymes only. Okay, otherwise the remaining proteins that are available outside also can get destroyed. Okay, so this is the way. This principle of compartmentalization actually facilitates the control of different metabolic pathways. So this compartmentalization, how it is helping us? Now, because it is compartmentalized, only oxidative degradative reactions which are really corrosive, they are happening within only mitochondria. So the remaining cellular compartments or cell organelles are not exposed to this destructive biochemical reactions that are happening over here. Okay, so nucleic acids are staying within highly protected nucleus, and these destructive reactions are happening within mitochondria. Storage of proteins are happening somewhere, lipids are storage is happening somewhere. So in this way, compartmentalization is helping, facilitates the control of different metabolic pathways. So here, as far as significance of enzymes are concerned, enzymes differ from ordinary chemical catalysts. Okay, I presume that you know what is a chemical catalyst. Okay, so ordinary chemical catalysts differ from enzymes in 4 important respects. They have very high catalytic efficiency. Usually in a organic reaction, let's say A plus B gives C. This is some kind of a reaction if it is there. If it has to be catalyzed so that A plus B will form more towards C. So if A is 1 mole, B is 1 mole, if you are taking like that, if you take 0.1 mole, we call this as catalytic quantity. Less than 0.1 mole, we call this as catalytic quantity. This is usually what we take. And catalytic conversion rates will range from 10 to 10 power 2. Means this catalyst can increase the rate of reaction by 10 to 100 times. So this is what we usually observe in organic reactions. Whereas enzymes can achieve even higher reaction rates. That we will see in the coming slides, no problem. Enzymes function under mild reaction conditions. This is really interesting. The specificity of catalytic reaction is laudable, is really important, because here almost like asymmetric catalysis is happening in the presence of an enzyme. So how it is achieving the 3-dimensional specificity is what we will see in the coming slides. And their capacity for regulation, this capacity for regulation will not be there in ordinary chemical catalyst, because if the reaction is finished, from outside you have to tune. You have to either increase the temperature, reduce the temperature, or stirring rate, or else if you wanted to stop the reaction, you have to quench the reaction by adding water or acid or a base or something like that. Okay, it all depends upon the type of reaction you are handling. But here inside your body, it has such a beautiful mechanism so that it can control itself. So how this control is happening, how it is able to achieve this, that's a very important thing that we will see. The first one is very high catalytic activity. So you will be surprised to see this. See here, 10 power 6 to 10 power 17 times greater than those of non-catalyzed reactions. So in the last slide I have shown you that 10 to 10 power 2 means 10 to 100 times only. But here in case of enzymes, they are able to achieve such an amazing rates, 10 power 6 to 10 power 17. Okay. So if you take hydrolysis reaction for acetylcholine will be hydrolyzed as acetic acid and choline. Okay, acetylcholine esterase is the enzyme. It can hydrolyze more than 10 power 6 molecules per second. Acetylcholine can hydrolyze more than 10 power 6 molecules per second, okay, into acetic acid and choline. So they are so quick. On the other hand, enzymes have one very important drawback, that is they have very low grade stability, and they can undergo biodegradation because they are proteins. And when in your body, if you have proteolytic enzymes job is to destroy respective proteins, okay, because these are globular proteins, they can be biodegradable. So these are more like green catalyst. Okay, once you use it as a catalyst, then you can destroy it and reuse the amino acids that you are getting from digesting that protein material. So this is so amazing. It is an absolute and a very good example of green catalysts. So here I gave you some examples of decarboxylase enzyme, nucleoside enzyme, etc. Okay, so here all these you can see from 10 power minus 1 to 10 power minus 6, uncatalyzed rate is this one, catalyzed rate is this one, means it has increased by 10 power 16 times almost. Rate enhancement is 1.4 into 10 power 17 here, at least 10 power 6 to 10 power 17. Okay, so like this, friends, catalysts are really aggressive. They are specific for a particular chemical, but when an appropriate chemical is given to that as a substrate, the reaction can be achieved at lightning speeds. The next one is enzymes function under mild reaction conditions. Okay, so as you all knew, in our body by temperature alters from 37 to 38 degrees centigrade. Okay, because in your stomach a little bit higher temperatures will be there, but it's fine. But it will not go beyond 39 degrees centigrade. In fact, let's say if somebody is suffering from fever and if your temperature goes above 39 degrees centigrade, okay, or 104 degree Fahrenheit, then your enzymes will stop functioning. Okay, instead of with rise in temperature, you are supposed to increase the rate of reaction, but enzymes, because they are getting degraded, so they cannot show any biological activity. So it is really interesting. That also we will see in the coming slides. So friends, this is the way how enzymes show specific reaction profiles. The next one is enzymes are highly specific. So here I wanted to give you a few examples. Specificity in the reaction. Specificity in the reaction means, let's say you have a hydrolase enzyme is there, which is supposed to perform hydrolysis reactions. So if you give an ester group, R C double bond O R dash, okay, ester group, then it will be hydrolyzed as RCOOH plus R dash OH. But if a hydrolase is provided with a double bond, it is supposed to give hydroxy, but this reaction will not happen. A hydrolase cannot convert an alkene into alcohol, means addition reaction, means if this is a addition reaction that is supposed to happen here, it will not happen. That's the reason why enzymes are highly specific for a particular reaction. You will see in the next lecture, coming lectures, the classification of enzymes, where you will see oxidoreductases, hydrolases, ligases, isomerases. They have their own specific job to do. Okay, they will do that work only. The next one is substrate specificity. Substrate specificity means, here it is almost like functional group specificity, R dash. Okay, this is one. This is what we have seen in specificity of reaction. And the second one is substrate specificity means, if you take glucokinase enzyme, it can convert glucose to glucose 6 phosphate. It is highly specific for glucose and it can convert glucose to glucose 6 phosphate. But when you give ribose, you wanted to convert ribose to ribose 5-phosphate. Glucokinase is not going to recognize ribose, so this reaction will not happen. So in that way, enzymes are highly specific for their corresponding substrates. This is one simple example with which you can understand this concept. The third one is stereochemistry, which is really important for us, and we have to understand this one. Yes. Here I'll give you a very simple example. Our system, because in our body, in the beginning slides I told you that we can make use of starch as a food, so that starch can be converted to glucose by an enzyme. Okay, so here alpha amylase is the enzyme which can convert starch to glucose. So alpha means, in case of starch, glucose and glucose are connected via an ether bond. We call it as a glycosidic linkage. So here we will have stereochemistry. If the linkage is alpha linkage, then only alpha amylase can hydrolyze, recognize and hydrolyze this link, so that glucose is released. Whereas in case of cellulose, as I told you, cellulose, we cannot convert cellulose to glucose. Our system cannot convert, means alpha amylase will not be able to do this job, because in case of cellulose, between glucose and glucose, the linkage is beta oriented. Beta oriented means this is stereochemical change. Because of this beta orientation, our enzyme will not be able to recognize this one, that fitment will not be there, so thereby it will not be able to achieve any biochemical reaction. So stereospecificity is really important. So I also have one more example here. So in case of anaerobic metabolism, pyruvate is converted to lactate. This is what we know already. Okay. In carbohydrate metabolism, we have discussed in detail about this one. In case of reduction of pyruvic acid, the reaction that is happening over there is addition of hydrogen across C double bond O. Addition of hydrogen across C double bond O. An addition reaction, when it is producing a chiral center, because addition is happening across a double bond which is planar. See this planar. So hydrogen can approach carbonyl either from the top side or bottom side, from either sides. So accordingly, there is an equal possibility for formation of both the isomers. Okay, L isomer can form as well as D isomer also can form. But when lactate dehydrogenase enzyme is there, okay, so it is responsible for formation of lactate from pyruvate. By taking hydride from NADH, it will achieve this job. So here it always forms L-lactate only. It will not form D-lactate. Then why it is happening? One possibility is the enzyme is holding on to the molecule like this, so that hydrogen has only one phase available for addition. Okay, so the entire bottom part is actually covered by the enzyme. You have the enzyme over here, so this side is inaccessible. This side is inaccessible. So hydrogen can only add from the second side. So this is the way how enzymes are highly specific as far as stereochemistry is concerned. The fourth one is enzymes can regulate themselves. Okay, so here some concepts are there which we need to get clarity. One is catalytic activity of enzymes can be inhibited or increased by binding of specific small molecules and ions, binding regulatory proteins, or covalent modification of enzymes and molecules through phosphorylation. Okay, and many other things are there, which all these things we will see in detail in the coming lectures, no problem. But here these are the observations scientists made. So what they have seen is certain enzymes only upon addition of ions, like in case of hexokinase, we need magnesium ion. Without magnesium ion, hexokinase cannot perform to the optimal level. And binding of regulatory proteins, because in cell cycle, study of cell cycle, there are so many regulatory proteins are there. When present, it actually switches on cell cycle to initiate some biochemical reaction to initiate. It is like that. and certain enzymes are there which are already there, but they need activation. Activation usually happens via covalent modification. Usually phosphorylation via protein kinase enzymes activate certain enzymes. These are common observations, either switching on, switching off. Both can be done in this way. The specificity of few enzymes also can be changed. This is one more observation. Specificity means in our life cycle, we go through different phases of life. Sometimes we are small kids, sometimes we are old, sometimes we are middle aged. Okay, at appropriate times our biochemical reactions alter their reaction rate as well as specificity. So that type of tunability is there, whatever they observed. Like in case of galactosyl transferase, its specificity alters because during lactation period. And the next one is amount of enzyme. Okay, sometimes this is more like quantitative control, qualitative control. Okay, quantitative means let's say normally when we in the beginning, in the adaptability concept, I told you that somebody is taking carb to get energy. So in this type of a person, you will find more and more of alpha amylase enzyme, because he is not eating any proteins. Okay, large quantity of proteins he is not consuming. Let's say he flips to proteinous food or keto diet, then what will happen? Because alpha amylase production will go down, because we don't need alpha amylase, much of alpha amylase, so it will take some time, maybe 15-20 days. Within 15-20 days alpha amylase production will be reduced. Parallelly, protein hydrolyzing enzymes, both proteases as well as lipases, both will enhance, and energy production from proteins, like from urea cycle rate will increase, gluconeogenesis rate will increase. So in all these, the enzymes whatever are needed, they will be upregulated. It is like that. So in this way, enzymes can control themselves through signaling mechanisms. We will see all those concepts in detail in different chapters. I made separate lectures for all these. We will see them in detail. Now friends, let's see the graphical representation of enzymes, because enzymes concept cannot be simply understood by two-dimensional mediums. Okay, now that's why I made a few slides for you. This is the structure of enzyme. Means enzymes are globular proteins. Okay, so when you have a globular protein, in this you will have certain region where biochemical reaction is going to happen. So in simple terms, enzymes are nothing but our workforce. Okay, they are actually there for achieving our objectives. Let's say you wanted to digest your food, you need some workforce for that. What is that workforce? That workforce is nothing but enzymes. So they'll have to do a designated job. So here they are physically involved in achieving a particular biochemical reaction. So that's the reason why they need to have semi-flexible structure. Okay, semi-flexible structure. Like let's say if you have a cutting blade like this, a scissor, then this scissor is actually made of steel. Okay, it is made of steel. Why it is made of steel? To maintain structural integrity. Structural integrity. Let's say if you make scissor with wax or rubber, when you try to use it for cutting a paper, it will change its shape. So unless it has structural rigidity, integrity of the molecule, integrity of the system cannot be maintained. This is one. Second one is this entire handle as well as this entire handle, both are highly rigid. You will not be able to change the shape. But here we have a region where it allows the entire system to become flexible. so that it can move in these directions to achieve your ultimate objective of cutting a paper. So it need to be semi-flexible. You need to have structural integrity as well as semi-flexible environment is also needed. So this type of environment you will see in globular proteins. In case of globular proteins, this is one of the representation. For detailed discussion regarding protein and its structure, three-dimensional structure, etc., you please see my lecture on proteins and their structure. I made a separate lecture that gives you a very clear understanding on how the semi-flexible concept is coming into the coming for especially globular proteins. So here whatever I am representing, this is what we call it as alpha helix, and then you have these flexible regions are nothing but loop regions. We call them, this is helix region and these are loops. Okay, whenever you have a helix, these are highly rigid and chemically stable entities. Loop regions are highly flexible. Okay, so that's the reason why, let's say if you imagine this one like this. Okay, I'll change my ink color so that it gives you a very clear idea. So this is like this. Okay, it is more like a scissor now. Okay, it is more like a scissor. Because of these so many flexible bonds that we have, it will be able to move in this way. Okay, so when a molecule is coming over here, it will be able to physically assist the molecule to stay over here and then achieve a particular biochemical reaction to happen. So friends, this is the way how you have the basic outline of enzyme structure is there. The next one is, I'll give you another representation of enzyme structure. So this is another way how you can see the three-dimensional structure of a protein. So let's see the various parts of enzymes that we have over here, the technical names. This the protein part in an enzyme, we call it as apoenzyme. And the region where actually the biochemical reactions are happening, this entire region is what we call it as active pocket, or otherwise receptor pocket. Okay, we also can call it as receptor pocket. So in the receptor pocket, sometimes you will find some certain non-proteinous groups to assist in a biochemical reaction. If that non-proteinous group is dialyzable, means when you take the protein and that molecule together, and when you dilute it, if the molecule can come out of the enzyme pocket, then this type of molecules are what we call them as coenzymes. These are what we call them as coenzymes. Sometimes if the molecule is covalently bound or very strongly bound to the enzyme pocket, so thereby it cannot come out of the receptor pocket or otherwise from the enzyme, we call them as cofactors. Apoenzyme plus cofactor plus coenzyme, all of them together. So this is what we call it as the total enzyme, or we have a technical name for that, holozyme. So friends, what is holozyme? Holozyme is a combination of apoenzyme and coenzyme and cofactor if it is needed. Fully functional enzyme. Apoenzyme without cofactors or coenzymes will not be able to achieve its biochemical objectives. Okay, so let's I hope all these concepts are clear to you. Now you know what is an apoenzyme, what is a cofactor, what is a coenzyme, what is holozyme, what is active pocket or receptor pocket. Okay, these are the concepts which need to be very clear in the beginning. So how actually an enzyme does its job? In case of an enzyme, it is supposed to achieve catalysis. So this is a traditional classical picture of energy and rate of reaction. Okay, so let's say you have a reaction like A plus B gives C. This is a reversible reaction. Okay, reversible reaction, how actually it happens? Because when a chemical reaction is happening, as per Arrhenius theory, effective collisions will actually be able to achieve a particular chemical reaction to happen. During effective collision, what is happening? High occupied molecular orbitals of one of the reagent and lowest unoccupied molecular orbital of the second reagent, they come near to each other while collision. So these two, when they hit each other at appropriate points, then they form a bonding orbital. This is in simple, you can understand. Let's say I'll represent it in another way. Let's say if you have, this is salicylic acid, COOH, and now you have here CH3Cl. I'm writing it like this. Then if it hits over here, then it can form aspirin. Okay, OCOCH3 and COOH. But let's say if it hits over here, or if it hits over here, will it achieve any reaction? Only this can give you a product, whereas all these cannot give you any product. So the remaining collisions, whatever are happening, they actually waste your energy. Energy wastage will happen like this. And here, for the for achieving this one, effective collision, this can be represented like this, because this is a reversible reaction. Usually what happens is, it forms a transition state first, then it gives you the product. Okay, so A plus B, this is the delta G value or internal energy of A and B together. Then to achieve enzyme substrate complex, or otherwise AB, complex AB, because so much of energy is wasted like this, that's the reason why we need so much of energy to achieve the transition state. Then you get the product. Okay, and here if you see, the energy gap we have over here is what we call it as activation energy. Why this much energy is needed? In one way, you can simply understand by looking at this picture. Effective collisions are needed for a chemical reaction to happen. So here, effective collision means this carbonyl carbon must hit this OH only, but it should not hit any other place on the salicylic acid, which will not give you any kind of a chemical reaction. So because of that, because you cannot control this reaction, let's say you take salicylic acid and acetic anhydride in an RBF, round bottom flask, and when you conduct the reaction, you will not have any control on the way how these two chemical entities are going to hit each other. So that's the reason why so much of energy is going to be wasted. But when you have an enzyme here, what is happening? Let's say in traditional catalysis also, the energy that is needed for achieving transition state reduces significantly. So what is the reason why the activation energy is actually reduced? Enzymes or a catalyst physically assist the substrates to come to each other, so that rate of effective collisions will increase. Let's say if you have hydrogenation by using platinum or palladium catalyzed hydrogenations. So what happens is, this platinum or palladium holds on to alkene via non-covalent bonds. Okay, so that one of the reactant is not randomly moving, so that degrees of freedom for this particular reactant is reduced. So when hydrogen is given, it can effectively hit the molecule, so thereby you can easily achieve the chemical reaction. Effective collisions rate can be enhanced. So in case of an enzyme, what it is doing, it physically holds on to the molecule, holds on to the substrate, and it will try to achieve the chemical reaction. It will try to achieve the chemical reaction. Now how come it is happening? Let's see. Let's say, for example, this is the enzyme, and here we have one pocket here and another pocket here. This is a representation of an enzyme. Let's imagine. Okay. Now we have a substrate. What is happening? Okay, so here a hydrolytic reaction is supposed to happen. So enzyme is going to physically hold on to the molecule, so thereby it will allow the bond to be modified appropriately, and once the bond is modified, you will see the product to be released. So this is what exactly it does. So this is the way how enzyme reduces activation energy. So friends, I hope you understood the concept of enzyme and how it is able to achieve the catalysis. So here this is a reversible reaction. So let's say these two are supposed to join together, then it will hold on to the substrates, so that the appropriate functional groups are very close to each other. Okay, so let's say here we have OH group and here we have COOH group. So with the help of by physically assisting these substrates, it will bring these two functional groups together, so thereby it will achieve ester group formation easily. So in this way it will reduce the energy that is needed for formation of transition state. So friends, I hope you understood the concept of enzyme catalysis. We'll see in detail about all these concepts with the specific examples in the coming lectures. So here I am trying to tell you the same thing. Active site is equal to binding site plus catalytic site. This concept you need to be very clear. So let's say in case of enzyme activity, what exactly is happening? Enzyme will have an active site which recognizes the substrate, so that it physically assists in binding onto the ligand or the substrate. So here so much of area is available for binding of a substrate, but all this binding region, whatever we have, is it exactly necessary for the bioactivity? That's a question mark. So once the biochemical reaction is achieved, the compound products will be released into the solution. So here, where exactly the chemical reaction is happening? Here. So the amino acids, whatever we have over here, are actually needed for biochemical reaction to happen, but the remaining whatever areas that we have, all this area is meant for binding the structure. So here in this binding region you will have specificity. Okay, specificity. Let's say if you have esterase enzyme, okay, if you have an esterase enzyme is there, we have acetylcholine esterase is there, butylcholine esterase is also there. How can you achieve the specificity? Both are esterase enzymes, so catalytic site remains the same. The amino acid triad, whatever we have over there, that remains same, but the receptor pocket dimensions are going to vary. So in that way, binding pocket gives specificity to the enzyme. Catalytic site is where the chemical reaction is going to happen. So I have a few examples for that. So this is a protease enzyme. In this protease enzyme, catalytic site contains these three amino acids: serine 195, histidine 57, aspartate 102. So these are what we call them as triad. Okay, hydrolytic triad. And near to this one, you will have a pocket where specific amino acid sequences are recognized. Because in case of proteases, we have trypsin, chymotrypsin, etc. they have their own specificity as far as amino acids are concerned. So I have this here. See, in case of chymotrypsin, catalytic site remains the same, but binding pocket contains serine. Whereas in case of trypsin, we will have aspartic acid. In case of elastase, we have valine and threonine lining the binding pocket. Catalytic pocket remains the same. The three amino acids that we need for the hydrolytic reaction, they remains the same. So friends, this is what exactly is meant by active site, binding site and catalytic site. I have a few more examples are here. In Calvin cycle, we have the specific enzyme, ribulose biphosphate carboxylase enzyme, which integrates carbon dioxide into ribulose. So here you can see, just forget about whatever chemistry that is happening over here. Ribulose phosphate is recognized by two pockets. One pocket contains arginine and histidine. The second pocket contains lysine and lysine. So these pockets are meant for recognizing this substrate. Whereas catalytic activity is achieved by catalytic site residues here. We have lysine and aspartic acid over here. They are responsible for integrating carbon dioxide onto ribulose phosphate. So friends, this is what I mean by catalytic site, binding site and active site. Now let's see the structure of enzymes further. Enzymes are proteins, okay, so this is what I have told you. Enzyme contains apoenzyme, coenzyme and cofactor. In case of some of the enzymes, you will not have any coenzymes, but it contains only a metal ion. These are what we call them as metalloenzymes. Like in case of hexokinase, you have, in case of hexokinase, both substrate will be there, coenzyme will be there, cofactor will be there, like magnesium. In some of the enzymes, you will not find a coenzyme, but only a metal will be there. So those enzymes are what we call them as metalloenzymes. Let's see the structure. This one we have seen. Okay, this is the three-dimensional representation of an enzyme, and here in these pockets I am representing over here. These pockets are what we call them as active pocket or receptor pocket. So here you have ATP. Okay, adenosine triphosphate is there. So here so this is the structure of an enzyme, where in the active pocket you will have substrates will be there, and some pockets are designated for especially the coenzymes. Okay, so these organic compounds which assist an enzyme to achieve a particular biochemical reaction, we call them as coenzymes. Several coenzymes are there. I have a list, and I made a separate lecture on coenzymes and cofactors. Sometimes you will have a metal atom integrating into the enzyme and for its function. So this metal atom can be alone, or it is a part of a system like porphyrin ring system. In case of cytochrome oxidative reductase enzymes, iron will be there. In case of hexokinase, magnesium will be there, like this. Okay, if it is an integrated, if the compound is integrated into the structure of enzyme, where enzyme and that non-proteinous material, if they cannot be separated, that type of materials, chemical compounds, are what we call them as cofactors. So they are usually metallic ions. Some of the non-metallic atoms are also there. We will see them. So here, this is the example where hexokinase enzyme is there. This is hexokinase enzyme. This is a three-dimensional representation where we have ATP will be there, as well as this is magnesium ion. This is ATP and this is magnesium ion. And in the background you can see presence of glucose, because this is on the other side of the pocket. Okay, so here in this pocket ATP and magnesium will be there. Magnesium helps in orienting glucose appropriately so that phosphorylation can happen. Without magnesium, this alignment does not happen appropriately, and hexokinase will lose its catalytic efficacy. So friends, this is about the structure of enzyme. These are some of the examples of cofactors and coenzymes. So these are coenzymes with thymine for TPP, NADH, coenzyme A, biotin, as well as metallic ions like zinc, magnesium, etc. So many are there. These are some of the examples of different enzymes where these coenzymes are integrated. Interestingly, vitamins have a direct role to play in the enzyme function, because vitamins, like here in this table you can see many vitamins that are there in our nutrition. The vitamins are integrated into our system as coenzymes in most of the cases. Okay, so here we have thiamine, or vitamin B1 will become thiamine pyrophosphate, which is essential for aldehyde transfer reactions. And we have folic acid, tetrahydrofolate is necessary for single carbon metabolism or methyl transfer reactions. And the same way pantothenic acid, biotin, etc. all these, they play major role in our enzyme function. So friends, I hope you understood the concept of enzymes and enzyme structure. I hope you understood the terms enzyme, apoenzyme, holozyme and coenzyme, cofactors. And I also I hope that you also got a clear idea on three-dimensional structure of an enzyme and why it is very important for us. And in the coming lectures we will see in detail about its classification, where the role of enzymes in our health and disease, as well as its applications in drug design. I'll conclude this lecture. With this I will conclude this lecture, and I request you to please share this video with your friends so that they also can get benefited. And no subscribe, no likes. I'll see you again with another very interesting lecture soon. Thank you. I'll see you again with another very interesting lecture soon. Thank you.